Hi, this is Nalexia from the Dark Iron server, and I'm going to go over everything you need to know on how to play a Demonology Warlock. First, let's go over some basics. You're basically the caster equivalent of a hunter. Your pet, especially with a Demo spec, is a good chunk of your damage, so you should always have a pet out. The hands-down winner among your pets for DPS is the Felguard. The buffs you should have on yourself at all times would be Fel Armor, Soul Link, and you should always have a Spellstone applied to your weapon. Now let's look at the Demo spec. This spec is pretty much the only one you're going to see out there for Demo locks. The only exception would be if you needed suppression for hit. Then I would recommend taking points out of Nemesis for suppression and putting them back into Nemesis when you get to the hit cap through gear or gems. Your glyph should be as shown: Life Tap to give Spirit more bang for its buck in the spell power department, Quick Decay for faster corruption ticks which equal more DPS, and Felguard for the plus 20% attack power buff to your pet. The Warlock raid hit cap, by the way, is 341 if you have a Draenei and a Moonkin and or Shadow Priest in your raid, 367 if you have a Moonkin or Shadow Priest but no Draenei in the raid, and 446 if you have no Moonkin, Shadow Priest, or Draenei against boss mobs. Now how should you gem your game? Red sockets should always have 23 spell power, period. No exceptions unless you're a jewel crafter, then 3 red sockets should have 39 spell power. Yellow sockets should have 12 spell power 10 haste in them at all times, unless you need to gem for hit, then you can go 12 spell power 10 hit, or if you really need the hit, plus 20 hit. Blue sockets, you go with the 12 spell power 10 spirit for socket bonuses as long as the socket bonus is 6 spell power or higher. The reasoning behind this is assuming you're not bad and you always keep the life tap buff up and have Fel Armor on during combat, then the blue gem will be equal or better than a red gem in the socket. Fel Armor gives 30% spirit to spell power, and the life tap glyph gives another 20%, giving spirit a 0.5 coefficient to spell power. So, 12 spell power and 10 spirit with a plus 6 spell power socket bonus would be equal to a 23 spell power gem. If the socket bonus is 5 or lower, however, put the 23 spell power gem into the blue socket and forego the socket bonus unless you have to socket blue for your meta. You also need to have the 21 crit rating and 3% increased crit damage meta gem in your head, which requires 2 blue gems to work anyways. Your enchants on your gear should look something like this: 30 spell power 20 crit rating to head, which is the Kirin Tor rep enchant, 24 spell power 15 crit rating to shoulders, which is the Sons of Hodir rep enchant, back should be 23 haste, chest can be either 10 all stats or 15 spirit. The difference in your game between one and the other in this area is minuscule. Bracers should be 30 spell power, gloves should be 28 spell power, for your belt you should have an eternal belt buckle with a 23 spell power gem in it, pants should be the 50 spell power plus 20 spirit weave, and feet should be 12 hit rating and 12 quick strike rating. Your rating professions should be jewel crafting for the 39 spell power gems, tailoring for the cloak enchant, blacksmithing for the extra socket to bracers and gloves, enchanting for the enchants to rings, or even engineering for the random crap you get from that, like speed boost, belt bombs, and hand rockets. Now what do you need to have with you to maximize your damage and functionality in a raid? Firstly, you need to have a full complement of soul shards. As Demo Lock, you will eat through soul shards quickly, especially on progression boss fights where a wipe costs you a shard every time, and you can easily burn shards squeezing out an extra soul fire when Decimate has worn off of a target before you finish casting your last soul fire. Flask of the Frostworm plus 125 spell power trumps any other flask you could get as a caster. Food buff should be Fish Feast or Firecracker Salmon for the plus 46 spell power, and for your pet, Kibler's Bits for plus 20 strength and plus 20 stamina is best. However, this food is usually pretty difficult to find. Finally, Potions of Speed. These will benefit your long casts immensely. Using these as a pre-pot and using it during Bloodlust or Heroism is a huge DPS boost, especially if you're in a Soulfire rotation. So we have gone over your spec and glyphs, how to gem, how to enchant, what professions to take, and what to bring to raids. Now let's look at the rotation. Something you want to keep in mind before we look at the rotation is your meta abilities. If for instance the fight allows you to go in melee range, which a lot of them do, you will definitely want to be in that range while in meta and popping your Immolation Aura for extra damage. Typically for me at the beginning of a fight, I will pebble all my cooldowns, and then I will Demon Charge in, pop Immolation Aura, and then begin my normal rotation. As with most classes, it's not a rotation per se, but more of a priority before the fight begins. You want to have all your major cooldowns macroed into one button like so. Here I have my Potion of Speed, my Racial, which is Blood Fury, my Metamorphosis, Demonic Empowerment, and my Spell Power Trinket all macroed into one button. I hit this button once and it does all these things simultaneously. I also have one that does all this minus the Potion of Speed for longer boss fights where I want to save my potion for during an execute phase, where I can get a second or third meta in before actually reaching that 35% mark. So a second or two before the fight begins, I will use my macro, then begin my rotation, which is Immolate, then Corruption, then Curse of Agony, and Shadow Bolt as a filler until Molten Core procs. Then it's Incinerate until I have used up Molten Core. You want to have a good add-on for Molten Core to show you easily when it is procced and how many charges it has left. I use Tell Me When. One thing that may switch you up on this is if there's no magic debuff in the raid, i.e. a Boomkin or an Unholy Decay. Then instead of Curse of Agony, you may find yourself casting Curse of Elements. In that case, you simply put Curse of Elements at the beginning of your rotation, cast it once, and just don't worry about a curse until COE needs to be refreshed. This actually makes your rotation a bit easier. Once you've done all this, it's just a matter of looking at your dot timers. Again, I use Tell Me When in conjunction with my UI frames, which is stuff, to help me keep track of when my dots need to be reapplied. You want your dots up on the target as much as possible, so when you see Corruption is at around a second and you're in the middle of a Shadow Bolt cast, get ready to throw Corruption back up. Or if Immolate is about to wear off, queue it up as your next spell. Keep your dots rolling at all times while refreshing the life tap buff on yourself when needed, and recasting Demonic Empowerment every time it is up, while also using your meta cooldown and ratios as they come off of cooldown, or when the time is appropriate. One more thing on dots, do not clip them. This is a huge DPS loss. There are some boss fights that have adds, for instance Marogar with his Bone Spikes or Torvon with his Frozen Orbs. It is usually a DPS boost to switch to the adds even if they go down quickly if the boss is above 35%, because you get a Shadow Bolt or Incinerate off on one of these adds while they're at 35% or lower, and now you have a Decimate up for 10 seconds, and that's 10 seconds of Soulfires you can cast on the boss outside of Execute. You still, however, want to keep your dots rolling while doing this, so feasibly you're only going to get 2 to 4 Soulfires off with the strategy, but it's still a DPS boost while helping the raid. Once the boss is in your Execute range, which is 35%, you will get the Decimation buff, which allows you to cast your Soulfires at 60% of its normal cast time and does not cost you any shards. You still want to keep your dots rolling during this Execute phase, however knowing the fight and how long it has left during this time can help prioritize what you do. For instance, if you know the fight's going to be over in under 24 seconds, you would not bother reapplying Curse of Agony. The number one dot, however, to always keep up during this phase, above all others, is Corruption, because this is the spell your Molten Core procs off of, which also gives your Soulfires an 18% damage boost and a 15% increased critical strike chance. A nice Soulfire crit while under the effect of Molten Core can hit for upwards of 40,000. Well, I've gone over everything you need to know to be a successful demo walk in raids. Again, this is Alexia from the Dark Iron server, wishing you all the best of luck out there. Now go melt some faces with your newfound knowledge.